Hello, I think that we are live. Welcome to the Be Smart About Art show. My name is Susan J. Mumford, and I'm delighted to have you here today with me for the Wednesday storytelling session on Be Smart About Art. So it's fun. Every Wednesday, what I have come to doing, I've brought on some speakers in the earlier days, in more recent weeks, as I've been reading from our book, Art is Your Life, Make It Your Living. And it's really enjoyable to read these stories and then to talk through the ideas behind them as well. And I have to say, on a personal note, I think that today's piece was just exactly what I was kind of needing as well. I'll explain why in a few minutes. And I think that it's really relevant to all of us today. So this is a relaxed session. Feel free to comment, feel free to share your own exemplar, your own story, maybe on this theme. So the theme is have a clear reference point to harness in dark moments. I'm going to read this for you first and foremost, and then we'll talk about how this applies to your business. We're going to talk about how this applies to this point in time that we're all going through together. And I think that as a concept, this story that I give in the Be Smart About Art book of blogs, it really does speak to a technique that you can use in times of great need. And to a certain extent, whereas for me this was spontaneous and it's what happened, I found that since that time, kind of knowing some different stories that I can pull from. So it's sort of I'm going through this, okay, take myself back and remember what happened however many years ago, right? Let me have that as a bit of inspiration or something that I saw happen in somebody else's life, probably somebody I know, real life experience, either of yourself or watching others. Just there's just nothing that beats it. It's kind of like a comparison to that is when you, let's say, not thinking about the current point in time, but just in general. So let's say that there was something really horrible that was happening in another country, and you read a headline about genocide in some country or something horrible happening, and that wouldn't really affect you personally or emotionally. And maybe that message came from some charity, some initiative looking for some funds, and so they were saying, please, this is an appeal, please donate to us. And there's statistics on this. I know I've come across research, I've come across reports on this. I don't have them to hand, but basically people just won't really respond to that. And then you say, here's the story of Mariella and what happened to Mariella, and suddenly your heart is just going, and you just cannot get your card fast enough, your PayPal account up fast enough to make a donation, because it's that human to human connection, and which is something very deep for us as social beings, right? And so me thinking about how I responded to a challenging moment for me personally in my career goes to show that power of that individual experience. And in that case, actually not the experience of myself, but actually of some ancestors. So let me read this to you now. Again, for anyone who's just tuned in, have a clear reference point to harness in dark moments. I write, I recently visited San Angelo, Texas, where my great-grandfather settled after leaving the old family farm in Tennessee that had been all but decimated during the American Civil War in the 1860s. In my own years as a business owner in the creative industries, I have found it important, essential in fact, to recall the story of this 19th century American who was a quintessential example of the adage, go west, young man. And I could even say go west, young woman, to what my great grandmother, one of his children, was like. Okay, here's what I mean in contemporary terms. When you find the road of your art practice bumpy and foggy, in that you were, in fact, probably your daughter-in-law. I was just thinking through my family history. I'm going to go back to the start of that sentence. So it was daughter-in-law who would have been go west, young woman. Here's what I mean in contemporary terms. When you find the road of your art practice bumpy and foggy, in that you were juggling so many things all at once, or you can't see what lies ahead, what is a personal reference point that will ground you Such a reference can be a crucial reminder that really things are not that bad. Let me give you an example. In April of 2006, when I had been assigned the lease to a rooftop gallery in Soho, London, I found myself exhausted and on my hands and knees one evening, varnishing the floor, which is lacquering the floor in American terms, brushstroke by brushstroke. I broke down into tears on that dirty old, and I remember it really was dirty and it really was old, wooden floor, asking myself, quite thin as well, the fact it was all together in individual little planks was quite incredible. And I thought to myself, what have I got myself into by committing to premises in central London? I just felt overwhelmed. There I was, I'd taken on this lease or assignment of a lease. I was lacquering floors. I mean, there I was on my hands and knees. What had I done? And then I remembered Granddaddy Johnson. Back in the late 1870s, he had taken the train, so he's the one who married the woman Go West. So Granddaddy Johnson, back in the late 1870s, he had taken the train out to the middle of nowhere in West Texas and had ultimately established himself as one of the foremost businessmen at the then frontier edge. Arriving after having left Tennessee, he reportedly stated that he would never slap the backside of a mule again. And that story is kind of family legend. Today, one can visit the restored site, now on the Register of Historic Places, one of his many achievements, the fancy grocers Johnson and Taylor. So he actually set up various local businesses. He was an entrepreneur of his time, although I'm not sure they would have actually termed it that. He was known as a businessman, and it was a normal thing for businesswomen to have a local business. That's kind of how things really operated back then. So that's not to mention the fancy grocers, other businesses, including the livery stable, a stage line business, mercantile business, banking business, real estate, and at one time, the role of deputy sheriff. And I know his brother was actually the sheriff at one stage. In comparison with the challenges he had confronted, on what grounds could I, there on my knees in my gallery, justifiably be overcome by the trials and tribulations that I had faced in early 21st century Britain? After that early spring evening varnishing the floor, I learned to consciously take hold of difficult moments. I trained myself to take stock, think about the positives, and put the situation into perspective, always in context of Granddaddy Johnson, who had started with nothing and he had achieved so much. I mean, literally, the family was penniless when he followed his brother, who was a little bit older than him. The brother had gone up by horseback to West Texas, and my great-grandfather had taken the train out, which by then existed. Accordingly, I suggest that all business-owning art practitioners, artists, curators, you name it, have a clear reference point, and I think points, have multiple ones to harness in dark moments. Have a think about the inspirational stories of your family and friends and store those in your mind so that you can reflect on them in moments of need. Reference points will help you maintain control over state of mind, also known as mindfulness, which will be fundamental in picking yourself up and thus continuing to take steps forward in your career. And thank you for that very lovely comment that I'm receiving. So that's what I did. Is I basically I had to ground myself in that moment. And I needed a little lecture to self because I was feeling sorry for myself, but not sorry for myself. I was feeling scared. I was thinking, what have I done? Is this completely insane? And actually, in the end, I went, you know what? Actually, let's put this into perspective. Let's think about how lucky I am actually to have this space, this little gallery in Soho. How much did I have? It was completely incredible. And how much really was being put at risk? So, I mean, if we think about those things, and that's another example, I talk about this from time to time, of having this kind of deep natural response that would have been in the unconscious. And I brought it to my conscious mind as I was there leaning on the floor, and I still remember it to this day. I remember I was in the middle bit, my little gallery. I thought to myself, I was like, Susan, what can I think about? What's something to really bring home the fact that I am okay. It's all going to be all right. So I started to think about that particular story. And I actually looked at the ring on my finger, which I've realized I didn't include in that story because the thing that triggered that story in my mind was that I was wearing this, I had a diamond, which was actually from that same person, that same great grandfather that I was then wearing. And I thought, gosh, he was able to get that and he came from nothing. Literally had nothing. How on earth did he do that? And I thought, okay, I'm going to remember this whole story now. And I just think in terms of being really thinking about the business side of it as well, away from that emotional side too, is practically speaking, what have you done to protect yourself? What have you done to protect your family? In different situations when you need that reference point to harness, when you think, gosh, it's all terrible, think about what is good, think about what is in place. And I don't think I would have done this at that point in time, but what I had done is I had set up a limited company, which was a sole director company in the UK for that gallery business. And what that meant was that even though it was big and scary, that I had taken on the assignment of this lease, that actually I had protected my personal property, which was a little flat that I had purchased. I had a huge mortgage for it, but that's contemporary times for you. I had purchased a property several years prior to opening the gallery. And so when it came to the decision for myself as to whether I would set up just on my own as a sole proprietor or sole trader, or if I would set up as a company, I set up as a company so that it was a different legal entity than Susan the person. And thus, if things did go wrong, that my own home wouldn't be at risk because I had actually set up the business as its own company. So in fact, yes, it meant that I was committing to monthly obligations. A few years down the line, when we had the credit crunch and subsequently the recession, I had to start paying my rent on a monthly basis. I ended up getting an extra retail management job 3 days a week. That was exhausting. And I did that working 7 days a week. What was it? 2 days of which I would be working in both the gallery and the retail job in order to guarantee that I could pay the gallery rent. And I did that in order to fulfill the commitments that I had as best as I could. But there's another consideration as well if you want to think really practically about what you've done and maybe what you've got in place, which is that I also had insurance in place. And this goes back actually to my maternal grandfather, who I remember that he was at one stage in his life, he had a life insurance business. And the thinking that he had behind that, from what I understand, was that he wanted to help look after families in having that little business. And he thought that insurance was really important. And my best guess is that that reflects his own upbringing when his father died. That was the kitchen table when he had some minor, what would today be a minor operation. And my paternal grandfather was only a boy. He was maybe 9 years old or something, again, out in Texas. And so the mother moved them all back out to the farm. I think they'd been living between the town and the farm or something. All she knew is farming. So all of my grandfather's siblings, they all grew up very, very poor. Da, 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 da. There's a whole story there, which is amazing too. Um, and so on his end, and he had at one stage been an insurance broker helping families put together these policies. And so I think that always made me think, oh, insurance is really great because it helps to protect people, and this is a really good thing. And so I'm a total insurance geek as a result. Touch wood, I try to always have my insurance policies in place as a result of that. I think about how can you mitigate risks. And so there again on the gallery floor, one of the things that I had done in February of 2006, the month before I set up my gallery, the month before, actually, I guess the gallery was set up in April, and I think now we would call it pop-up exhibition that took place in St. James's in Mayfair. Fantastic event. So I was setting up that for March. I was setting up the gallery for April. I had gotten the gallery insurance in place. I had gotten payment device in place. I mean, it was all very, very quick and intense, but I was definitely ready at that stage. So there was also insurance to help protect myself, to help protect my family as well. And so you've got both the personal stories to inspire you, but also the ability to think, what have you done? and then perhaps to think what else could you do or what other activities could you do. So if I was initially, as promised, applying that to yourself and your individual circumstances whenever things happen. Um, I want to move on in a moment to also think about the differing situations for your business and what you might do about that. But before I go there, I think one of the things that I found out when I was a speaker really applies to us thinking about this idea of having stories to call upon and circumstances, life experience to call upon when you need, and observing the lives of others and being inspired by others. And that is to find ways of recording them. When I was getting speaker training a few years ago, one of the things that I was really learning that was important was that whenever stories would occur to me, to make a note of them, and then to write out the stories as well so that I didn't forget them. And what you end up having is this whole tranche of ideas that you can pull from. It's almost like if you think about different people who might have varying projects. Let's say there are photographers who are watching this video and you're going, gosh, I've got this new idea for a project. I've got this other idea for project. I had an idea for project back then. Write them down. It might be that people aren't able for all of your ideas at the moment to pursue those like you normally, quote unquote, normally would. But how about recording those so that you can access those in the future? This seems to be a bit of a family day for me. So it makes me think of how my paternal grandmother out in West Texas, that she was just a fantastic note taker. She was so good. And she definitely inspired me about taking notes as well, about recording things down so that when she needed to remember something, she had a nice little cheat sheet. When I would speak with her on the telephone as a girl, I would go, gosh, how does she know what we spoke about last time? And how does she know to ask me that question to follow up on this thing that's happening? Well, of course, she had our little notebook next to the telephone. I mean, so simple but genius. And often in life, the solutions are right there, the most obvious thing, but you have to come up with them in the first place, or maybe hear about them from someone else. So take a leaf out of my paternal grandmother's book and think about where you can store notes in a way that you will be able to find them, remember them, organize them in a way if that's something that you like to do so that you can actually find them. And I know that the way that people record information has really been changing over the years as well. I know that in more recent times, I've been using Notes, which is an application on Apple devices. And that's been a really excellent way for me to record stories and thoughts when I'm on the go. I can access that exact same application, those exact same files across my devices. That's the smartphone, it's the tablet, it's the laptop, it's the desktop. So it doesn't matter which devices you're using because they all are sharing the same user. Now, some people prefer to have something tangible that you write in. I mean, for myself, interestingly, during the pandemic, I have actually been using this notebook in a way that I have not been using notebooks for years and years and years. I mean, I have got pages and pages of notes. I was actually showing you accidentally the kind of blank part, but if we get up here, there are lots and lots and lots and lots of notes up here. So I mean, I am just really using that now because I'm much more homebound these days, right? I'm not actually traveling around the world needing to find digital solutions for everything because I'm here. I'm at home and therefore I'm able to use paper. So whatever works for you. And you could even think about things that you want to write about, kind of like how I published that story in the book. And that was a way of saying, hey, here's an idea for you. So are there some stories that you think other people will be able to connect with? And how does that exactly work with your own brand? That's something to consider. You can do this as a personal exercise, but you can also do it as something to enable people to connect with you and also give people some other ideas as well. And a lot of that is going to come down to how you like to communicate. Are you somebody who is very private and therefore whatever you put out into the world, it's going to be fully buttoned up, objective, nothing shown in terms of insight into your personal being? Or are you somebody who likes to kind of open the door into yourself and go, here's a bit of information about me? Now, a lot of people are going for the latter these days, particularly when it's personal one-person business brands. It's going to be a different story if it's a one-person business brand versus something in which there's a big staff, and the person who set it up or the people who set it up will definitely have a different brand than the company brand. So there are different ways of approaching that. And that's going to influence whether or not you want to even share some of these stories and some of these just insights that you got. Having said that, sometimes you still have company leaders maybe creating articles or blog posts, and then you move forward and you think about the current time. And I felt like this piece was particularly relevant to be reading today, because not only might this be a big dark moment for many people on a personal level, many people have been unwell, many people have lost loved ones during the pandemic. People have been challenged with needing to make changes in their businesses. I have just been reading in the art newspaper today, this is the latest edition, about the impact to gallery businesses. What is it that people in the UK art trade, this is probably the galleries, they reckon that it was something like 30% or a third, which are very similar figures, will close as a result of the pandemic. Let me just see, this says around a third of galleries globally, so that was not the UK, it was globally, do not expect to survive the crisis. The survey also found emphasizing the vulnerability of smaller businesses, dealerships with less than 4 employees reported the lowest likely chance of survival. So the chance of survival was 65%, so about 2/3, while larger galleries with more than 10 employees were more optimistic, with 3/4 expecting to weather the crisis. I mean, this is a serious situation that we're going through at the moment. By the by, for those of you who want to find that piece, you can access some complimentary articles in the art newspaper if you don't have a subscription. I will say I've personally got one, and I think it's excellent. That is titled Galleries Face 70%. Trying to get this. Not used to handling paper anymore. Galleries face 70% income, well, that is newspaper sense. Galleries face 70% income crash due to the coronavirus. And that's by Julia Mikalska and Anna Brady. Anna, who I personally know. So there we go, there's the title of the piece. And the publication itself is from, that's probably the May 2020 edition. I don't know the exact date of the publication as in the article, but worth reading that piece. So we've got all of that. So I can see that people will have been needing to pull out kind of some inspiration and some ideas in order to weather the crisis. And then, of course, we now have this quite understandable upheaval that's taking place, particularly stateside, but beyond that as well. A lot of people are saying that the social upheaval happening is something that has been waiting for decades, if not hundreds of years. And so it's quite right that that the situation has come to light, for it to come to light at the exact same time as the pandemic, and for this to be so personal for so many people. Only yesterday, we had a number of people, as in probably hundreds of thousands of people, I'm going to guess, on social media posting just black boxes. The important thing was not to use the hashtag Black Lives Matter, because then that gets in the way of the messaging, but for organizing peaceful protests and projects and that kind of thing. But it was to use the hashtag Blackout Tuesday to show solidarity with that movement. So now you have got this happening as well. And I was seeing a lot of people saying, thank you so much, various people for doing this. There, of course, was some negativity, but this is just human nature. There was some criticism, but again, that's human nature. By and large, what I saw was positivity about the solid force, the solid action across communities globally yesterday. And so you think, well, gosh, that's happening now as well. So there's going to be even more need to find those internal resources, to think about just practically and objectively as well, what do you have in place and what else can you do to protect yourself, to protect your family, that will not only be of use now, but down the road as well. And what changes do you need to be making? I mean, I have to say, when I was looking at that article and I was thinking about, say, the fact that I'm in the UK and I'm considering how much longer the government is providing the furlough scheme support, even though it's being reduced in the summer. And some people, I was listening to the LAPADA, that's one of the trade associations in the UK. I was listening to the LAPADA leadership series. They're calling it LAPADA Leaders, and it's kind of a weekly conversation that they're running. And I was listening to them this morning, and the figures that were coming out there, and the fact that museums are trying to plan for several years ahead, and the museums have anticipations of how many will survive, da 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 da. And you kind of go, wow, what other changes do we need to make? What other planning do we need to do? And I guess one of the things that probably concerns me at the moment is I'm hearing a lot of galleries and artists kind of going, gosh, fingers crossed that things open back up in September. But if you look at the science, and this is what was being said in this, well, suggested in this conversation today, is thinking about several years ahead and working in different ways in the meantime. The galleries that are opening, to have in mind social distancing, to have in mind calendars, booking systems, that is, to have in mind not participating in art fairs as we knew them. So to think about a different reality. And when going through all of this, going, right, what stories can I pull out to remind myself that I'm not alone? I've done stuff before. I have got evidence to myself that I have rocked this in the past. I know that all of these people love me. So thinking about those people who also are there surrounding you and supporting you, and having those people who challenge you to be the person you have within you when you decide to make a change, and people go, wow, that's great. I'm so excited for you. That is their take. And yes, having people who are questioning what you're doing and critiquing you. I know myself as not a completer finisher, but a starter. I love to have people who are completer finishers around me. And I love to have those people who go, Susan, have you thought about this going wrong? Have you thought about that going wrong? And I'll go, no, but I guess we need to. And that's really great, right? And if I think, oh, that makes it all the more challenging, then I've got all of these stories that I can pull on and just go, right, what can I use to inspire me right now? So it's pulling it from unconscious concern and worry and fear and what have you, into pulling it into conscious and going, how can I tackle this? Whether it's through my own stories, through thinking about somebody who really believes in me and envisioning that person and even reaching out to someone. So today has all been how exactly we can harness stories, we can harness all of our community to get us through those dark moments. And we are going through a different period. I mean, this is something that none of us have experienced. I mean, life is always that way. Life is always something in which we've not experienced it before. We could never see the road ahead. I think right now is an intense moment for many people. So storytelling, it has a really important role. Everyone, I'm going to bring today's session to a close, and I trust that was interesting and insightful and perhaps inspiring to you to think about your own story. So where are you going to record them, and how are you going to go about doing that? Maybe give that some thought immediately after I finish. So I'm going to close down the show for now, and say I look forward to seeing people on Monday of next week for the Art World This Week next week. I've been Susan J. Mumford. Check us out on patreon.com/besmart about art, and I will look forward to seeing you again on the show soon. Ciao for now.